Okay, it's here.
There we
That
go.
one.
There we go.
6, 5, 3.
These arrows. All right. This is the final of the sessions on the AMF analyst and management framework that we have here at IV&V. This is a little bit about the origins and the underlying architecture behind how all of this stuff fits together. In the breakout session afterwards, we're going to actually pull up the architecture document for this and go through some details and even more gritty levels. So if you want to attend the discussion breakout after this, we do have some good content available for that as well. So, origins. The AMF sits on the shoulders of some very nice efforts here at IV&V. There's an analyst workbench that was built for SMAP that took the three-tier architecture approach to help the SMAP team. They did exchange information, lessons learned from MSL and from the SMART team, and actually took elements of all three of those tools which have been popular here at IV&V and said, what's the best of breed there? And tried to get lessons learned from all of those and put them together in a final solution that could be used for any program that wanted to use it here, or any project. The artifact mapping tool was another effort that was attempted a few years ago. Some people might be familiar with that, which was meant to be an ability to trace between basically anything. And we think we've successfully been able to do that with the AMF that we have. It also is, it's not a binding solution. It's an open solution. It's a model of the way that the IV&V work relates to itself. And it doesn't say you have to use this element or you have to use that element, but it does support the three main platforms that we have available. The Eclipse platform, the Microsoft Office platform, and the internet by implementing the same model in Java, in VBA, and in an XML schema, so that tools that write to those platforms can interact with the work that the analysts are doing. And one of the big things we wanted to do is be able to interact with things that we'd already bought or already had here at the IV&V facility. And right now, I believe everything that we deliver as part of the package is either open source or free software behind it, so that it doesn't cost anything to get in the game with this stuff. Down below was the original concept when we started at the drawing board. It'll look a little different today, but the basic concept is there. You've got the two green boxes there, artifact and assessment, which are artifacts, if you haven't heard me say it in the last 3 days, is everything that we look at, things that we receive from the developer teams. And assessments are everything that we do. The three yellow boxes there are traces between those. One on the far left traces assessments to assessments. The one in the middle traces assessments to artifacts, and the one on the end traces artifacts to other artifacts. And then the blue boxes represent things that we look up. So we have types of traces and types of assessments, and just by simply adding new types to the list, the artifacts and the assessments can react to that and recognize them as new entities in the UIs that we've been doing. My co-presenter today is Neal Saito, and he's going to take over for a while here from me. See if we can get you in focus.
Thanks, Don.
Yeah.
I found this quote, this definition of software architecture, which I tend to like. I particularly liked the last line about architecture as analysis. We tend to think of the final products of architecture, the building or the software product or the system in its completed state, and think of that as architecture. But one of the fascinating things about architecture is that it becomes an analysis project. It's experimenting. It's seeing what works, what doesn't work, trying out things in smaller models before you actually do the creation, and then ultimately testing. So going into this, some of the principles we decided early on was that it would be an open system. It would be, we try to make it easy to understand, so that other people can pick up on the work that we're doing and use it efficiently, quickly. Other people can adapt what we're doing to whatever they're doing. And technology neutral, that when we do make designs, that we try to, and I think we succeeded in, for the most part, avoid anything that's specific to any one particular technology. And we also wanted to employ industry standards, design patterns, the interior architecture, which you've probably heard so much about, our 3-level architecture, and object orientation, so that everything could work together, that we could plug and play, basically. The other thing we wanted to make sure was that it was stable, that this was something that was going to last. It was, we wanted to capture the essentials so that over time, across projects, it would work, you know, everywhere we could apply it, hopefully. And then extensible, that it is flexible. It is something that can be adapted to individual projects. Okay. So I like this diagram. This is something I actually found on Wikipedia, that has it has 2 different paths to how you get to the architectural evolution. You have the direct path from the analysis, but then you also have a path from the synthesis. And this goes back to this idea that it's a continual analysis project. We weren't just trying to build something, we were trying to analyze the domain, in this case, the IV&V domain. And really this, we say that we've been working on this for a year. Really, in a lot of ways, we've been working on this for a few years. Don, a couple years ago, started a skill building group for modeling, and what they undertook was the modeling of the technical reference, the 90-1 reference, to really get into what IV&V does, what IV&V is. And that's been an ongoing project. Originally, we picked it up as a just, you know, what are we going to model? And we said, well, we might as well model what we're doing. So we're taking into account the catalog of methods and the asset library. Also, IV&V practices. Everybody on the architecture team are practicing IV&V analysts. I actually only do this 1 day a week. The other 4 days, I'm sitting over spreadsheets or poring over documents of some sort, writing TIMs. So it continues to be part of an analysis process of what IV&V does, and develop an understanding of IV&V. So ultimately, our analysis distills down the domain to its essential elements. In the case of IV&V, it's that we take actions to make assessments about artifacts. So that's where we get the major players here. Then we apply a synthesis. This was a matter of continually going through, testing, looking at our different concepts, looking at our different implementations, and saying, does this work? Is this really what's going on? So there were many days that we literally tweaked the model, and that afternoon we'd be writing code to see if our tweak was correct. So the final evolution was to gather the products together, and Actions is probably the best example of this, which is, if you saw Don's original concept, that was the original concept for the AMF. Actions weren't part of it, but as we worked through the process, we discovered that we needed this actions object to complete the picture, to make a more useful set of utilities. So one of our principles was loosely coupled. We wanted a framework that could be used in individual settings. So basically everything that's gone into all the various concepts as far as object orientation, as far as the tiers, it's a matter of making something that could easily be picked up and used. One of our principles is everything is highly individual. So each of the domains, the artifacts, the assessments, the actions, are all individual domains. They work internally by themselves. The powerful thing would be to put them together, but if all you really need to do is manipulate a bunch of artifacts, you can do that with this. You don't have to have everything. You use whatever you need.
This is kind of a little bit of the transition here. This plus sign is going to zoom in. That interaction that Neal was just talking about, if you look here, we concentrated on the assessment because they're so key to, these are the products that we produce, but you could put any one of the three legs in the middle there, the assessment, the artifact, or the action. But you can see that an assessment here has a collection of assessment traces, which could be things like a claim with arguments, an argument with an issue attached to it, things of that nature. And then this manipulates the group, and in the group you have individual trace objects for an assessment that point back to a particular assessment. So this collection is all relative to the assessment, saying these are all the other assessments that are related to me, whether they're parents, children, peripheral, whatever that relationship is. And I can navigate through this. What was really nice with the architecture is this collection, once we pulled this out and made it an object and implemented it, we didn't have to write an artifact assessments traces or an action assessment traces. We simply reused the assessment traces objects there for the artifacts and for the actions. And we utilized this same pattern when we implemented artifact traces and the action traces as well. So that's a key piece to the trace architecture. I got that back for you. Okay, thanks. Mess up the interface?
No, I don't think so. Another principle is the cross-platform, the use anywhere, and this is particularly why we wanted to get the XML schema created early in the process, so that really the idea is that we've implemented in Java, we've implemented in VBA, but with the XML, most modern languages can have some sort of XML processing available to it. So we can transfer the business objects back and forth between programs. The XML schema definition file is out there on ECM. Here you can see the beginning, and you can see that once again it's loosely coupled. You don't have to instantiate an entire project to be able to use the XML schema. You can make your XML document for any of the major business objects, a collection of any of the business objects. And you can probably do it together. The design is trying to modularize it so that it is whatever the project's going to need. They can do it, and they can quickly take these tools and put them into the whatever utilities they might be making. One of the future projects we're working on is to make it more web friendly, and my next project is to come up with a JavaScript implementation of the domain model. So hopefully that will be available, and that opens up for a lot of, it can tie into Jira and Confluence and all sorts of other web tools. Once again, stable. We wanted to distill everything down to the essence of what IV&V does and has done. One of our projects coming up this coming year is going to be to make heritage analysis a reality. And the fact is that past projects did what we do. They assess artifacts. So we should have a collection of their assessments. We should know something about their artifacts. We should be able to just quickly go in, look at what they've done, and be able to draw that out using the framework. And that can provide a basis for a certain amount of your heritage analysis. It's also across projects. At some point, the idea would be to be able to analyze program-wide the data that's being generated through analysis, through the different analysis. To find out what's common, to find out what common situations projects are finding, are getting together and maybe seeing problems that could be anticipated across projects. So it goes beyond just developing something for individual projects. It's a matter of using the information in more creative ways, in creating data and breaking it down into ways that can be analyzed from all sorts of different angles. And finally, extensible. You know, obviously, when you distill something to the essence, you don't get everything. But I'm not sure how you do that. Focused in on this, because the names of these things, the custom tag and the custom data reveals that our extensibility strategy came from simply adding collections of XML tags. Let Don elaborate on that.
Yeah, one of the key things that we realized early on is that different projects capture different data, and it wasn't a big light bulb moment. It's just something you realize, or something you encounter as part of your work as an IV&V analyst. So, and in being on different projects through the last 7 years or so, sometimes it's been easy to capture additional data, and sometimes it's been not so easy to capture additional data. So we wanted to make it as easy as possible to capture additional data. So we came up with this customization architecture, one that anticipates building on this, and it supports two different flavors actually. On the top half here, we have the definition of customizations that have been added to the project. And as projects add these customizations, they become part of the process asset library that's accessible through the catalog methods. And then the next project can just reuse it. You know, I like the way Project XYZ did this. Well, here are the assets that they developed to do that. And one of the key things here is a custom tag, which just basically identifies a piece of information, gives you a definition of what that's for, and what data type is it. And we've got types so far like string, integer, float, Boolean, date, time. Nullable Booleans have been quite useful for us. We're going to add things like images, things like that. So that's a tag to identify one piece of data, and then what we have here are the types. Here's assessment types, action types, artifact types. They all have the same functionality, and they just have a different name. This has a description for the collection. So let's say I add 7 custom fields for ECTP on my evaluation that I need to capture. So I'll write up how I'm using those 7 pieces of information, and I'll name it ECTP requirement assessment. And on top of that, I can put I'll have the collection of the 7 elements there, which is a collection of these tags. And then I can have default behaviors that I declare that are hints for the user interface on what I want to do with this when it shows up in the user interface. So I can set default icons, both small and large, the default color, both a foreground and a background for text. And there are other things I could do as well. There's a generic, up to this point, the architecture handles everything for capturing this data and reacting to it so that you can use it. But if you determine that you really want to write a widget or capture that in a special table, you can specify, hey, this is a table that I've developed that supports this structure, so that you can actually have a full-blown table rather than having a table that has, you know, each field listed individually. And you can also do a custom class name if you want to put some functionality in there. Maybe there's a couple of analysis formulas that you want to build into this type of assessment. You could build a custom class to do that, that knows how to react to these type of things. And then, so that's all the definition of it. On the flip side, you have the usage of it. And if you look on assessments, actions, and artifacts, we have this custom data collection, which is a collection of custom data items, which has the tag that we defined above, any notes that we want to write about the data, the value, which will differ in type depending on what we define it on above, and then as string, which is what it does is, since a lot of the UIs manipulate things with strings, the as string says, give me back this data as a string, so that you can quickly put it in your UI. So you could say, you know, assessment dot question 1 as string. So since it's a Boolean, you'll get back the string false, and you can put that on the screen or something of that nature. A little more. And that's pretty much it. We've got about 3.5 minutes. We can do questions. We did not get into what does an artifact look like, what's an action look like, what does an assessment look like. We felt the traces and the customization were important concepts to get out here today in the general audience. In our breakout session, we're actually going to open up the architecture document and walk through some of those other classes that people are interested in. So you're certainly welcome to log on to that. The information is in the important info screen for those of you online, and for those of you in the room, it will be right next door. So, any other questions? Bill?
Could you go back to slide 7 for a minute? I think that was it there.
Oops, sorry. This one?
Yeah. The bullet there, second bullet there. Patterns are used to maintain consistency. Could you describe what you mean by patterns in this context?
Thanks. So in case, for those of you online, if you didn't hear, the question was, for the second bullet, patterns are used to maintain consistency throughout the system. What do we mean by patterns? And I believe I used the term pattern to describe a couple things that we're going through here too. First off, there are some industry standard patterns, and if we recognize them as we were putting the architecture together, we would call them out and say, we're using this pattern, and we would actually look up that pattern and do lessons learned from it. There's a book, Design Patterns, that has like 23 different common patterns, and that's been implemented in C, it's been implemented in VB, it's been implemented in Java, so it's a pretty well-known group of patterns, and we've identified probably 5 of the standard 23 that we're reusing. We also kind of have variations, like this trace pattern that we use. Once we developed the mechanism for the tracing, we reused it 3 times, so we used it as a pattern. The customization, we use that as a pattern. That's actually, that is actually styled after one of the patterns, and you're making me think of it off the top of my head. I believe that's the composite pattern that we're reusing for that one. So those are some of the patterns. Did that answer your question for you? Anybody have a 45-second question? Yes.
How are people, even if it's at a project level, currently interfacing with the system?
The question is, how are people currently interfacing with the system? The architecture is spelled out in documentation for people to use. There are a number of assets for Microsoft Office and the Eclipse environment that are available for projects to plug in. The main user right now is SMAC, but we're getting ready to bring a couple other projects online to use it. Talking to TQE and asking for the proper, saying I want to do this, and getting the process assets you need for the piece that you want is how you would go about using it.
I guess my question is more specifically the interface and details and how SNAP is actually interfacing with this project. Is it through, are they exporting items and importing them, or do they have UI? Are they using different languages together?
Yes. Pretty much they're actually doing all of those things that you mentioned, but what seems to be working best right now is we do have a SQL database that has data objects in front of it. You can get that canned and say, hey, I want to use the one that everybody else is using. And we have a Java Eclipse environment that interacts with that, captures the analysis and the artifacts right now. And we're bringing up the action stuff. That's a new feature that we developed, thought of this year. So that's available. And since we get a lot of our artifacts from outside sources, we have interfaces available for Word and Excel and Doors and Orbit to import data from there. The hope is that people will actually implement things like Doors and Orbit as their own data sources, so you don't have to import it, you just interact with it. The way that we do import things is we have two data objects, and we just take the business objects out of one and then say store them in the other one, or run change impact, or resolve differences in case you're doing an update. So there's things like that. Yeah. I think we can get bumped to the breakout room.
Nope. Breakout room? Breakout room? Thank you. So you can type your comment into the question field and I'll share it with the room. Charlie, are you on the phone?
Yes.
Okay, we are ready for you.